Hello, my name is Dr. Ginny Barrow, your CGA host on CGA Studios, brought to you by Game Change Agency. And I'm also the founder of Fearless Women at Work, an executive coaching and career strategy company. And for those of you who don't know me, I have been in the financial services and technology industry for the past 26 years. And I am thrilled today because I have next to me Tatiana Mahmood. And she and I will be talking today about a couple of really interesting topics, among other things. And we're going to be talking about creating workplaces that are conducive to innovation, and also designing those workplaces and our products through a human-centered approach. So I just want to introduce you to Tatiana, and just let me tell you a little bit about this powerhouse that I have right here. Tatiana is currently the General Manager and Director of Product Management, User Experience Design, and Mobile and Web Engineering for Amazon Web Services. She's a transformative leader with a passion for ideas and a drive to win. And she's an economic anthropologist and someone who successfully completed impossible projects. Now, Tatiana believes that the key to creating value is to understand people better than they understand themselves, and also designing through a human-centered approach, often challenging our technologies to stretch or recombine into new solutions. So welcome, Tatiana.
Well, thank you, Ginny.
So Tatiana, I want to start with a pretty basic question. You have a PhD in economics and cultural anthropology, and you now work in Silicon Valley, and you are a technology product creator and designer. So how did this happen?
It's funny because you would think, how does an anthropologist get to manage engineering teams? And I think it'll make sense once I explain the following, that today the technology is pretty much a commodity. We know so much about technology. It's moving so quickly. There's so many resources on the internet to learn about the technology. But really, when it comes down to it, building new technology products comes down to organizing people to build things for other people that they will want. That's right. And that's really it. It's all just about people, and it's people all the way down. It's about hiring the teams, motivating them to do the right things, understanding the mindsets of customers, and then matching those two things about the people who work for me and the customers that I'm designing for, and getting those two things to come together so that we can build really great products and services in as fast a time as possible so we can get them into customers' hands.
That's right. And so the two are very complementary.
They're entirely the same thing, actually. It's really just all about people. It's people who build the technology, and they build it in the service of meeting the needs of other people.
That's right. That is right. And so in this field of technology and innovation, building a culture that supports innovation is key. So can you share with us, from your own experiences, from what you do currently as a leader at Amazon Web Services, how you go about doing this, and what are some of the key challenges and some of the insights that you can share with other leaders that are in similar positions that would help them to create a culture that is conducive to innovation?
Sure. Well, the first thing is, I think as leaders, we all need to know, where are we starting from and who are the people that we have in our organization currently. So it's really around assessing what style of leadership do we have, and are we seeing the types of outcomes that we hope to see from our teams? And if they aren't, is it because we're not getting the ideas that we want from people, right? That are allowing us to stay ahead of the game, or at least keep up with the pace of change that's going on around us? Or is it around getting things to market, right, from the ideas? Often what I find in organizations is that there are plenty of ideas. Ideas are cheap. And it's really around the leadership creating a structure within the organization to allow those ideas to actually be developed, and to prioritize them and have enough patience to allow those ideas to really grow and flourish. So that's one key piece of it, is knowing where are you starting from and what do you want to see more of. The second piece is, how do you help people really get closer to their customer, right? So when we build something that's new, or when we create a new product or service, we have to be clear that we're doing it in service of something that our customers really want and will value. And so how do you build what we would call at Amazon, the mechanisms, all the way through the organization, from the entry-level worker all the way up to the CEO, so that those people are engaging constantly with not just feedback from customers and sales presentations or marketing events, but really feedback from customers when they're actually dealing with their frustrations around the product that we've built, and around what really frustrates them. Oftentimes, focusing on customer problems is far more interesting and will lead to much better ideas than anything else. So how do you build and grow an organization where you're close to your customer, where you give your people the time and give them the space and the infrastructure to then really take what customers say and what you see that they value, and actually start to build up from there?
Yeah. Well, how do you deal with some of the mindsets? Because in so many cases, leaders are under a lot of pressure, right? They're under a lot of pressure to deliver. They are expected to produce certain results. And what you're describing to me sounds completely logical. Yet I know that when we are in the workplace, that ideal environment, sometimes it may be difficult to create. So what would you say would be like one of the key things that leaders can do to address that?
Yeah. So I'm going to start by saying there's a thing in Silicon Valley right now, which is very popular, and that is embracing failure and recognizing failure and celebrating failure. And the reason I bring this up is that oftentimes the answer to a question like the one that you just asked is you have to celebrate failure and you have to allow people to take risks. And this is where I get to be a little bit counter to the overall Silicon Valley culture and say that for me and my teams, failure is never a goal. Mm-hmm. And so the thing that I try to get my teams to focus on is learning. Right. So success is the goal. Delivering very quickly new products and new services that people will love is the goal. And we want to get to that as quickly as possible with as little failure as possible. Right. So I don't give out failure awards. I don't give out, failure recognition. I don't give out failure incentives or anything like that. What I say is, if you have done something and you have been met with a surprise, right? Oftentimes that surprise is a negative surprise, right? Because you will have not gotten the results that you expected, right? You expect to get a good result and you got a bad result. As long as the teams then go back and analyze what went wrong, what happened, and that analysis leads to a key learning about our customer or a key learning about the approach that we took, that we can then ladder into a new way of doing things that will more likely to get us a successful outcome to either that problem or to a different problem. That is what we reward, right? So we as leaders can be highly tolerant of people getting surprises from their work products, as long as those surprises lead them to a deeper analysis and a deeper understanding of what they should do next. As long as those surprises lead to learning, that they will then result in a positive and successful outcome, right? So that is one thing that really, in terms of you asked about the mindset. So the mindset that we can instill and ingrain in our teams is one in which they are constantly trying and learning. Now they try to succeed. They don't try to fail. They try to succeed. But often if they don't, if they learn and then they succeed, that can be rewarded as equally or sometimes more, because that learning can actually lead to a bigger success than what they had initially been hoping for.
Right. And I think what you're saying is, let's not go with a low common denominator of let's celebrate the failure. What you're saying, let's give people credit when they have successively tried. And even if they had not succeeded, at least we've learned as an organization from it. And we can then, go from that place to the next one rather than go back to zero.
That's right. And the people who have tried and not succeeded need to take responsibility for that learning. That's also the other thing. I think that accountability and responsibility is very important. And this is where I think a lot of leaders get it wrong, which is they think accountability means that you punish people for trying things and not succeeding. And what I would say is, as a leader, can you take the approach, if you don't believe in rewarding failure, right, and you really don't have enough space in your budget to allow people to experiment a lot and fail,
right,
can you at least reward the people who are taking accountability for their failures, bringing you new learnings that resulted from it, and then giving you new approaches
right,
that will be successful?
right,
Right. Now, it does take patience on the employee's end, right, to do that, because it
right.
takes time to learn from your failure. It takes putting your ego aside. It takes a whole bunch of things that a lot of people naturally don't do. They often try to hide from the failure. They try to run away from the failure. But can you actually ask them to take responsibility for it in a positive way, unpack it so that we can learn, and then come up with a recommendation based on that learning about what does success look like given the surprise that you've gotten
Right.
out of the last thing that you've tried.
So it sounds to me like the mindset shift has to happen on all levels, from the employee to the supervisor to the management team, right? So that everybody knows that this new approach is actually embraced by the organizational culture.
Yep.
And that it will be rewarded accordingly.
That's right. And it starts with leadership.
That's
I
right.
really believe it always starts with leadership, right? People respond to, what their leaders do, how their leaders behave, and what they are rewarded and incentivized to do, to be quite honest, right? So, oftentimes I hear things like, oh, I'm from so-and-so country, and therefore we have a culture without risk-taking. And I've worked all over the world. I've worked in Asia. I've worked in, Moscow. I've worked in France. I've worked in England. I've worked in many places in the United States. And in each one of those places, there are organizations still within the same country, still with the same cultural mindset, that are able, right, to get people to be more risk-taking, or, have more innovative products and services coming out of that particular company. And the reason why is because the leadership has thought about their organizational culture in a very precise way. And they've actually grappled with what do we need to do to actually structure our organization in a way that will get us the type of culture that we want, and therefore the types of business outcomes that we want. Okay. And so it starts with the leadership asking themselves that question, and then the leaders need to model that behavior. Mm-hmm. So it's not just about saying things, it's about doing them and behaving that same way. And the CEO and their direct reports behaving in exactly the same way and holding themselves accountable in the exact same way that they want their managers to hold the frontline employees accountable, and starting to model that behavior and consistently communicating, not just through words, but through actions, mm-hmm. the type of culture that they want to build. And regardless of what country you're in, I have seen that work.
Right. So Tatiana, also what I'm hearing, what you're saying is, as an anthropologist and really looking at the human-centered approach, as leaders, to me, it sounds like we also need to stay very close to the source and to our employees to see what is working for them, what isn't working for them. Because sometimes we tend to jump to conclusions, right, when things aren't working. And if we don't really understand as well as we understand our client, if we don't understand our employees and what is happening, there could be a disconnect between the message, the results that we want, and what is actually happening.
Yep. So I think that's absolutely true. And early in my career, my very first boss out of college was Scott Edwards, who is a fantastic just manager. And the first thing he taught me was the practice of managing by walking around. And whenever he didn't have a meeting or he wasn't in meetings, he would just walk you know, the halls and walk past all of his entire organization and sort of pop in and say, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do for you? And that, to me, as you know, someone right out of college, that a vice president would be walking the halls and asking a 22-year-old, how are you doing? And is there anything I can help you with? Made a really big impact on me. And I often would ask him questions about the strategy or about the next projects coming up. And it really helped me both see the larger context of the business, and it also helped me navigate my career, right? Because then if I asked him, you know, what new things are coming up, what should I be planning for, I would know what projects were coming up, and I could put myself in a position, right, to be a little bit more proactive.
That's right.
And get the next awesome project, right?
Yeah.
Because I would ask him. And so I have done that my entire career. And I am a big believer in, no matter what level you're at, whether you're the CEO of a, you know, 300,000 person company, it is great to just walk around every once in a while and pop in with people and say, how are you doing? Is there anything I can help you with?
That's right.
I think you'll find that the impact on people is really big, and they will often call you over to their computer and say, hey, I'm working on this thing. Can you please take a look?
Yeah.
And then you will actually see what people are doing, and how they're working. And you can actually just sense the energy, right, of the place when you're walking around.
Yeah. So
get out of your office, walk around, and actually engage with people and ask them, like, is there anything I can help you with? Most of the times people are going to be like, no, I'm good. But, you know, if you sense that there's somewhere else that you should dig, also trust your intuition. That's right. And dig a little bit more and be like, oh, okay. You know, well, you know, if there's any way I can help you, let me know. I hear you're working on this project. How's that going? Right. So really trust your intuition and encourage people to actually talk openly with you.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I know that the Gallup poll came out in 2015 indicating that 52% of our employees are not engaged.
Yes.
So I think this is a great solution to begin, and simple, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't require a big budget. It doesn't require a big, you know, committee to get together to discuss it. This is simply walking the hallways.
Yeah. Also, you know, as you're, when you're a leader and you think that there's something that a different place where you want your organization to go, one thing that I would ask leaders to think about is, in the same way that we design products, right, we can actually start to design organizations.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, the 4 levers that we can use to actually think about how to design our organizations are 4 S's, so they're easy to remember: story, structure, systems, and skills. So story is the storytelling that we do as leaders. And the thing to understand about story is, what I often see CEOs who want to build more innovative cultures, what I often see them do is bring together an executive meeting, have a one-day offsite somewhere, and then they come up with their new corporate values. And those new corporate values are innovation, risk-taking, and, you know, customer obsession, right? For example, or customer focus. So, and then the CEO will come back, and the next day they will write an email. And that email will say, employees, yesterday we had an offsite, and we have decided we are going to be a more innovative company. And our new values are innovation, risk-taking, and customer focus. If you have any questions, please let me know. Right? Right. Does it sound familiar?
Oh, yeah.
Sounds familiar. Yeah, it sounds familiar to everybody.
Yeah.
And so the response in almost every organization is business as usual.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Would you agree? Yeah.
I agree.
So because there is nothing there other than words. There is nothing there that makes me believe that there's a new direction. There is nothing there in the delivery of the information that was in any way innovative. Sending an email is certainly not the CEO like taking a risk. And there is nothing about the customer.
That's right.
So not only did your format fall short, but the content doesn't match the way that you delivered that story.
That's right.
Right. So imagine, right, if the CEO had done something else, which is, okay, we want to really emphasize risk taking, right, and innovation and customer focus. So the CEO brings together, the top 2 customers of the company, right, puts them on stage and asks them to speak to him openly about all the things that are really, really bad about the company and the product, right? That's pretty risky.
I was going to say that's risk taking right there.
That's risk taking. That's innovative.
Customer focused.
And it's customer focused, right?
Yes.
Now, do people get the message in the company?
Absolutely.
That the CEO really believes in this?
Absolutely.
Because he or she is putting themselves out there to be, talked to very negatively by their 2 top customers about all the bad things that have happened to them, right? So storytelling is extraordinarily important, and there is almost nothing more important in the CEO's job than storytelling, and storytelling in the right way. So Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, if you read his shareholder letters, they are all stories to the employees and potential employees of the organization about what is the culture of the organization, right? It's not about the investment strategy, and it's really about what is the DNA of this organization and where is it going, right? And you really believe it, right? Based on those words. So you still can write, right? There's nothing wrong with writing, but it has to come off in a believable way. So that's story. The second is structure. And this is, the basic organizational chart. And the question is, how are you organizing the company? And what are you optimizing the company for, right? So if all of the creative, part of the company, reports into, engineering or reports into operations, how important is the creative part to this company? You can just see it in the org chart often, right? And so, and so where is the decision-making authority literally situated in the org chart? Who gets to make decision, and who do those decisions need to pass through in order to get the budget that they need for the ideas to both see the light of day and to survive?
Okay.
Right? And that you can often read directly off an org chart. So how do you structure the organization? The third one is systems. And systems are the formal and informal processes within an organization. So the product development process, of course, for innovation is very, very important. But so is the budgeting process. The budgeting process is a piece of an organizational system that I think is often overlooked, right? When people think about becoming more innovative organizations. When it comes, like, honestly, ideas are, cheap and they are easy.
Right.
But getting the budget and the sustained resources to actually to implement them and to scale them is very, very hard in most budgeting processes.
I agree.
Especially if you have a budgeting process where it's like everybody gets 10% more than what they got last year. By definition, your innovative projects are start at zero.
That's right. That's right.
And so you're going to have to take from other areas in order to fund those things well. And so your budgeting process is going to kill any idea.
Yeah.
That any great ideas that people might have within the organization. Absolutely. So systems are very, very important.
So we have about, I would say about 5 more minutes. So I want to ask you another question. So tell us the last one, and then I want to ask you another question.
Oh, so, and then skills, which are the human talents that we have access to. So that is all of, it's recruiting, it's incentivizing people, it's, how do we do performance management? What kinds of people do we bring into the organizations? What kinds of behaviors do we reward within the organization? And then importantly, in this era of quick, fast turnarounds and churn, really how we say goodbye to people. Because often when people leave, especially top performers, we're probably not going to be able to get them to stay, but we can do one of two things. We can burn them so that those top performers tell their networks about what a horrible place we are to work,
Right.
or
Yeah,
we can prop them up, say goodbye to them in a very positive way, and build an alumni network
that's right.
that will be incredibly strong. So saying goodbye is one of the pieces of human performance and human management that people often overlook.
And I would agree with that. I've never really heard any leader really focus on doing that goodbye in a very elegant way. And some companies get it right, and some companies don't.
Right.
So
Yes.
beautiful. Well, thank you so much for all that. And I know we also wanted to talk about the human center approach.
Yes.
But I also wanted to ask you a question about your background, because I know that when we see you, we make assumptions, right, about how you got to where you are potentially. And I know that you come from a line of really strong women,
Right.
especially a family line of engineers
Yes.
from the conversations you and I had in the past.
Yes.
So I would love to understand your approach to designing workplaces and products that are human, use a human-centered approach, and your background, and how those two are dovetail.
Sure. So, so just so that everyone knows, I do come from a very strong line of female engineers. My mother's an engineer, my grandmother's an engineer, my aunt's an engineer, my father's an engineer, and my brother's an engineer. I was the black sheep because I was more interested in how people worked than how in things worked growing up, although I am
Mhm.
interested in how things work as well. And so for me, going in to a very ambitious career was always a given, right? My grandmother was the head engineer of a very, very large Soviet factory. I was a refugee from the Soviet Union, and growing up, there was no question that I would be the type of woman that my grandmother was, right? Where she had hundreds of people working for her. She always questioned and challenged the work processes that were happening. She would often take the train to Moscow to tell the top Soviet leadership that they were doing something wrong and they needed to reconsider their policies and work processes. And she often won. She often got
Yeah.
a whole Soviet-wide, policies changed, right? Because she did an analysis on her factory. She brought that analysis to, the top, top people in Moscow, and they were convinced. So that growing up in that environment, it was never a question, right? What would I do, right?
Right.
And whether I would work was never a question either. And so I'm a little puzzled by that in the United States, because in other places, women work just like men work, and that's not a question. And so using, one of the things that I also found as a refugee was just how different people are and how differently they are built and how different their mental models are. And
Sure.
so as a leader, I think it's really helped me to have a more human-centered approach, because I actually try to meet people where they are, whether they're employees or customers. And I try to understand what is their mental model, where are they coming from? Because just because I think something feels natural to me and from where I come from, I should never think that it's natural to the people that I'm working with, or the people who work for me, or the customers that I'm trying to attract with my new product. And so stepping back and questioning all of your assumptions is fundamental to doing human-centered design, whether you're designing a product or a service or an organization. And I really think that, at least for me, being an immigrant has really helped to do that, because again, I'm in an environment where people take for granted that, women need to be more self-confident because their mothers and grandmothers weren't. That is absolutely not true for me, right? And so I can see how those assumptions aren't true for a lot of people, and that when we go in and we assume and don't really take the time to bridge the gap between what we think is true and what is actually true for other people, we can actually design the wrong things.
That's right.
Right? We can design the wrong solutions based on those things. So I think my personal background has actually really helped me to do that.
That's great. And yeah, I can completely relate, because I also come from the Dominican Republic. I came when I was 14 years old, And I know that there is a lot of assumptions that sometimes we make as human
Yeah.
beings.
Yeah.
And if we're trying to really design inclusive work cultures too,
Yes.
and to provide opportunities for different people, it's tough when you are measuring other people by your own standards and are expecting them to have, for example, a similar leadership style to yours.
Yes.
And so
Exactly.
if we focus on the results rather than in the methods, we may actually end up with a more inclusive workplace that is able to cater and understand our clients better because it
Mm-hmm.
represents our clients, and also come up with more different types of ideas than the ones that we've been coming up with.
I completely agree. And the more that we start even learning how to question assumptions in the workplace will help us how to question assumptions about markets and products. And that will lead to more value
That's right.
all around.
At the end of the day, aren't we all looking to live more fulfilling lives as human beings, right? Uh,
Of course.
Produce for our companies, provide for our clients and our shareholders. But how do we do all that in a way that really values our human contributions at work, where we feel welcomed and where our different ideas are not shunned but embraced?
I completely agree. I really agree.
Beautiful. Well,
Yes.
we're out of time, but I had such a fun time, and listening to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights. And I believe that the message that you have given us today is very valuable.
Well, thank you, Ginny. It was a pleasure talking to you. And thank you so much for inviting me.
My pleasure. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.